Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
And welcome back from your lovely summer break. Did you all have a lovely summer break? Lovely. So you're all welcome. First, can I introduce, my name is Councillor Taylor and I'll be chairing today's meeting. But before we get into that, could we go around and introduce ourselves? Just mention Councillor Taylor as
Councillor Lynn Masterman, Deputy Chair. Councillor Nicole Lloyd from Leeds City Council.
Councillor Chris Hayden from Bradford.
Councillor Andrew Carter from Leeds.
Councillor Brenda Monteith from Corderdale.
Jo Sykes, I'm an independent member.
Fiona Bernardo, Partnerships Officer.
Rush Hughes, I'm Head of Corporate Services in West Yorkshire.
John Robbins, Street Constable, West Yorkshire.
Tracy Brabin, Mayor of West Yorkshire.
Alison Lowe, Deputy Mayor of West Yorkshire.
Wendy Stevens, Research and Performance Manager from the Policing and Crime Team.
Ms Hunter, Director of Policing Environmental Police at the Combined Authority.
Councillor Anthony Smith from Lindley in Kirklees. Trevor Legg, independent member.
Councillor Nusrat Mohammed, Bradford Council.
Councillor C. Yates from Bradford Council. Councillor Gwen Lowe for Batley West in Kirklees.
Sharon Fraser from Wakefield Council, Legal Advisor to the panel.
And Samantha Wilkinson, Police and Crime Panel Officer.
Thank you very much, and also thank all the officers who sat in the balcony. You might have the opportunity to, some might be speaking later on, so those who will be speaking will introduce themselves as the day come back. So, without further ado, are there any apologies?
We've had apologies from Councillor Jackie Ferguson.
Item 2 is approval of the meeting. I take it that all members read the minutes. As everyone happy with the minutes? Is there anything? No? Thank you very much. We move on to item 3. Any item which have as no agreed item to add to the agenda today. So we'll go straight on to, item 4. Are there any declarations? Is there anything in the agenda that you feel that you need to make declarations on? No? Take silence. Yes, thank you. We'll move into item 5, which is the field assessment of the Yorkshire report. I'll go straight on to Tracy R. Alexson.
Thank you so much, Chair, and good to see everybody and fabulous to be here. Item 5 is the HMIC FRS inspections report. This paper is meant to update the panel on the recent inspection and forms the current cycle, regular cycle of police effectiveness, efficiency and legitimacy inspections. The rounds between 23 and 25, and West Yorkshire is 18th in the cycle. You'll have heard from the Chief Constable in the previous meetings of this committee about the cycle of inspections, how they differ from previous ones, and how findings cannot always be directly compared because of the changing expectations. And as part of this paper, we looked at other forces who've already had their documents published and how West Yorkshire compares. What's really important to me is we keep an eye on combined authority, police regions of size that are similar to ours, to make sure that we are not an outlier and that we are keeping up with others. It's not a full picture. Obviously, different forces have grades for different questions, but it does give us a snapshot of the current position. I'd just like to mention 2 things. There's 18 areas of improvement, but there are no causes for concern, which is welcome. And West Yorkshire continues to be the largest police force in England and Wales that's not been put into special measures by HMIC FRS. The governance arrangement we have with West Yorkshire Police were given a vote of approval in the report. I believe this speaks to the open and transparent relationship that I hope you've seen and witnessed, that leads to robust governance and accountability. I'm not sure, is the noise from my microphone or is it from outside?
Sounds not very good.
I think he's outside.
It's one very big pigeon, I don't quite know. But I'd like to hear the committee's thoughts on the appeal report and potentially the Chief will answer those comments.
Okay, thank you. We do have some questions, and it was a good report, good report. Thank you for that. Hold on, so we
I wonder, Chair, if the noise is your mic.
thank you. There's some detective and they in this matter.
We're just thinking outside.
They definitely need to go on training, Tracy. Yes. Thank you. Yes, we do have some questions for you on this report. So the first councillor would like to ask a question is Councillor Smith. I'll allow you to your two questions backwards in coming back to you.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome back, everyone. It's nice to see you all. So it was my feeling after reading the report that my first impression, and I've discussed this with the panel, it seems to be shared by panel members, is that there are significant areas where there seems to be a disparity between the findings of the appeal report and some of the performance indicators, robust and relevant metrics to enable meaningful scrutiny by both the Mayor's Office and the panel, that we, in other words, are we measuring the right things, and how can we stop ourselves perhaps being somewhat blindsided by future inspections?
I have 100% confidence in our team and our data. Obviously, there's different time frames of the Peel report, different areas of exploration, and as always, that the committee can speak to us about things that you want to know, and we will provide the evidence. But maybe, Wendy, I want to come to you to maybe talk through the differences in the data between the data that we provide to the committee and obviously what Peel are looking at.
Yes. So the performance measures that we use are from the police and crime plan, the previous police and crime plan, and were agreed at the time of the plan. I think our job is under the police and crime plan is to give the public's voice to the police, whereas HMIC go in and look at the operational work of West Yorkshire Police. So we're looking at the priorities that the public gave us. And of course, we're now in that new cycle, as you'll see later on in one of the papers, asking the public again. And I think you're right in saying that the performance measures will change for the next police and crime plan. But I think our understanding of performance is improving as well. And so maybe the next time we can look at a different way of looking at performance. So I know as part of the combined authority, we've looked at triangulating the performance rather than having those performance measures as we have now, to have triangulation so we can compare different measures together. But that's something we can work together with the panel going forward.
And can I also come in? Tracy and I were not surprised, we were not blindsided by this report. Actually, apart from one area, everything that was in that report, we were pretty alive to, actually. The one area for me that I was disappointed that I didn't feel like I had done my job as well as I could was in use of force, because actually we are really I think the scrutiny that we have brought to stop and search, which obviously was praised in the report, and I thought use of force was second to none, and we are exemplars nationally at the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, and to see that the use of handcuffs was the area where I had fallen short, I was very upset about. So I am putting renewed effort into that area of scrutiny. I have to say that we did ask about use of handcuffs, but I actually think that because we've got a lot of new officers, a lot of experienced officers have left, I think that use of handcuffs has crept in, and it's a big piece of work that we're focusing on alongside West Yorkshire Police, and the Chief Constable agreed with me that that was definitely something that we need to be focusing on, because that's about trust and confidence with people here in West Yorkshire.
Sorry, Chair. Is there something you could do with the microphones? Because this is quite disruptive.
Bizarrely, when the light is on mute, on the light on the front, this doesn't tell you anything.
All right.
instructions just to speak and it'll pick you up.
If the light,
Yes, if you switch it off after you've spoken.
if the light is on, your microphone's on mute. If it's off, your microphone is live.
It's getting worse, isn't it?
I wonder whether we should just turn them off.
Is that high and low and volume on
Chair, this room used to be called.
Very decisive, that's what we like. Top leadership.
We'll have to speak up. Suggest.
Old school, but maybe this is the way we have to do it. No, it's the mics.
Wherever they are.
Here we are.
Sorry, we don't put them in a child.
Fingers crossed. Okay.
You've got a brown wall. Super emotional.
Okay, thank you. You just have to speak up as loud as we can. Tracy, was it you speaking?
No, it was Alison speaking about the use of handcuffs. But just to add to that, I think there is something that is quite powerful about what the Chief Constable has said in the past, that there is like a ghost in the organisation, going through the whole organisation where there is a lack, because of underfunding and lack of recruitment of police officers. There is a real lack of that experienced police officer at different levels in the organisation because of the lack of officers over the last 10 years. So we do have young police officers who, through maybe lack of experience, are maybe using handcuffs more regularly because they feel unsafe or whatever the reason. But I think it's something that we definitely missed when we were talking about focusing on stop and search. And actually that was really applauded in the Peel report, our innovation around stop and search and so on. But it's something to definitely look at. And just to reassure you that all of the 18 areas that are highlighted, we've got trackers against, and we are now going to be laser focused on those areas that the Peel report has raised. But the one area that is still outstanding that I am still proud of is recording, because how difficult is it to compare like with like when you have other police forces whose recording isn't as good as ours, so their numbers are different. So in some areas they may look like they're doing better than us, but actually the recording might not be as robust. So it's, as always, I mean, this is an intelligent committee. You know that the numbers aren't always what they look like, and it's always important that we use our experience to drill down into those numbers, to look for nuances and comparisons.
Thank you, Mayor and Deputy Mayor. I think in the private briefing, we all of the panel recognised the areas of excellence that are highlighted in the report, and particularly in recording. I think the general concern is, as I said originally, are we measuring the right things? Are we aligned with the things that we should be aligned in terms of providing that scrutiny? I acknowledge that you say you weren't blindsided by it, but I think I speak for the panel when I say there are areas in this report, and more than one, where we do feel somewhat blindsided by some of the findings. So I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page, we're all open and transparent, we are a critical friend, and I come to you in that context.
Yeah, oh, it's very welcome, thank you. It's a team effort to make West Yorkshire safe, isn't
Absolutely.
it? It's not just for one person.
Correct.
Sorry, Chairman, I ask, do you want to give an example? Sorry, genuinely, to see what sort of areas...
Yeah. So if you look at, for example, recruitment, we've had a push on recruitment.
Yeah.
I think what came out of this report is that in the rush for recruitment, we've maybe not been able to deliver the training required to make the officers effective. So I don't think we're fully aware of the attrition rates. And there seem to be some disparities between what we see as being reported as good in our performance reports and come out as areas for concern. A small example of that would be emergency call handling. We're always seeing, you know, that we're in the top 5 and the report says we need to improve. So it's those kinds of areas, if that's helpful.
I think it might be helpful too.
That's where the dilemmas for us are, because right now I think we're the second or third best performing force in emergency call handling.
Yeah.
Yet the report has got a date in time that says at that point you need to improve, and then they won't change it because that's one of the areas we come up against.
Yeah.
The general principle of it is exactly as the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor Wendy have said, is as the framework for the inspections come out, we then restructure our performance monitoring, and that feeds through into the police and crime panel monitoring and the performance reports. But if there's more stuff on anything, then we welcome it. I mean, I'll probably might say some of this later. A lot of these things, the frustrating things for me and the forces, a lot of these things are things we've raised to the inspectorate. Yeah. So the use of handcuffs in stop and search, we've raised it as an area of concern. I can tell you right now that the majority of forces in this country don't know whether they're using handcuffs or not in stop search in the intrinsic detail we do. So we're still ahead of it, but you've just got to take that on the chin and say, yeah, we're on with it, and it'll improve.
Could I also say there's a natural tension between what the public want us to do and what we're being measured against. And what we don't want to find ourselves doing is not listening to the public in order to hit the targets of a national body. So there is a fine balance, isn't there, between understanding where we can do better, but also where we can show ourselves in a good place comparative to other forces.
And can I just say, we have reported on attrition rates here on several occasions, and in fact yesterday we sent Sam the paper on ethnic minority and female recruitment that has been promised, and it's got the attrition rates for both those groups embedded in that paper, which I'm sure Sam will send to you. We've got hard copies as well, Sam. But we have reported on attrition rates, but I would be really interested to know the areas where you feel that there's been a gap, so that we can take that into account in our regular performance monitoring information, because obviously we're not hiding anything. No. We really want to make sure that you feel assurance around these areas, and all the AFIs, all the areas that have been raised by this peel inspection, there's a working document now, as there are for all the peel inspections, the one on custody, for example, and other inspections that have taken place in the past. We've got a really proactive process where we hold the force to account for progress against those, and we're getting sign-off back from HMIC to say that those actions are closed. So happy to share that with the performance lead. If the performance lead wants to see that information, really happy to do that. So there you go. Wendy will show you that document, so you'll be able to see for all the inspections, all the FIs, all the work that's been done, which have been closed, which are still open. Very happy to share that.
There is no accusation from this.
Oh, no, I'm not taking it.
No. That you were trying to highlight it.
Yeah.
We're asking, are we looking at the right things? Mm-hmm. You know, and some of my colleagues on the panel, I dare say, will go into some of the additional detail and tease out some
and we
of those
welcome that,
areas.
because the new panel is an opportunity to include some of that stuff, isn't it?
I start with a broad question, you know, because I think it's important to raise and recognise.
No, very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Trevor?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think there was a good reminder that the appeal inspection is on the force, and the metric we're looking at is on the police and crime plan. So, but bearing that in mind, I mean, underpinning all of that delivery is people, the people that you have in the force. And I think for me, there was it came out particularly on the data around PDR's completion and about the support for officers requiring additional support in their roles. And I'm sure you picked it up, I'm sure you have things in place to address it, but it's really what's the assurance and how you're going to get that assurance. Because I think some of the comments, and I mean I've been through inspections over the years numerous times, particularly in the NHS where you've got CQC coming in, and clinical review inspections, etc., and there is always a big dissecting of the data and the data points. But I always used to look at the comments because to me they were sort of irrefutable. If that's how somebody feels, that's how they feel. And I think, you know, the concern to me is where there's comments in there about people felt they had little confidence in the support, and the comment about the PDR, the new system was described as ineffective by almost every person we spoke to during our inspection. So. And we have raised, I think, PDRs, haven't we? So I know it's an ongoing thing, so it's just to kind of double down on the assurance around.
And just to say, because I did say to the panel that we were doing really well on PDRs, but that was pre the introduction of the new system. So the assurance that I gave to the panel, because I feel personally that I have to give you the assurance that when I said it, it was true, that we were in the low 90s for PDRs pre the introduction of the new system. And John and I, Tracy and I, have had lots of conversations about the new system and the problems that we've been encountering. But I'm sure John will be able to give you more details about the nightmare that the new system is, which obviously everyone experiences when they introduce a new system.
So, yeah, I've touched on it before. Individuals and organisations make mistakes. I think we introduced a system that is not conducive to easy user use. It's hard, it's clunky, it's not right, and I regret not putting more oversight into it personally, but also not holding other people to account. But it kind of took us left field. We got to the point where I said, well, I should just go back to the other one. We can't. It's an IT issue. It's a structural change. We also didn't have the time and the space to train people on to how to use it. So they got trained on the new principles within it, which were all to improve the welfare, well-being, supervisory support, development, encouragement to staff, a 9-box group thing. I won't bore you with it all. But what we didn't train people on because we didn't have the time as to how to use it. So it's one where we're struggling to recover from. It's another one which we highlighted to them. It was obvious it was going to be in there. We've got some work to do on it to recover it and make it better, because I thought we were in a really good place previously in terms of professional and personal development and supervisor engagement and all sorts of things we had attached to it. And we've just allowed ourselves to not get something right, for want of a better word. Having said all of that, in an inspectorate and in a policing service and a public service, I'd much prefer it to be within this area, to be told that you're not doing the PDR of your staff very well, far more every day of the week than something to do with victims and other places. There are other references to other things. So in the great scale of things, it's an internal organisational management thing that we've shot ourselves in the foot with, created an own goal, whichever analogy you want to say, but it's going to be a long, hard recovery because of the type and nature of system we've got ourselves into for 11,500 people. So I'm almost at the point of saying sorry to staff for what we've done. We'll work our way through it.
Yeah. Could I just come back on that? So a couple. First of all, Tracy, you made a comment that you recognise the 18 recommendations and you're going to be laser focused on delivering. That's what the panel wanted to hear. Just coming back on the specific point that's just been made by the Inspector. Again, thank you for your candour, and it's reassuring to know that the issues on your radar. I think the concern from the panel would be that, you know, if these issues don't get dealt with and get embedded, that does lead to impact on victims and the way that we interact with the public, because we need to be reassured that continuous professional development and those processes are in place, and it's reassuring us that the officers are enabled to carry out their duties to the highest standards.
Yeah. And I should just say, I've got a meeting in the diary with Oz Khan, who's the new ACC for people, to talk about not just PDRs but also the progress from a human perspective, not from a technological one, but also how they're targeting career progression for women and ethnic minority officers as well, because we want to make sure that all that stuff is included in the thinking. So I'm meeting him to get that reassurance.
Sorry, can I say, presumably in that meeting it'll pick up the other point then about the officers in high risk roles requiring additional support.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alison.
Yeah, my question is around looking at the grading requires improvement, particularly in building support and protecting the workforce. I think in recent light of things that happened in Manchester and the whole publicity around it, I'm just keen to understand what plan we have in place to make sure that the workforce is adequately supported so that they can then perform. And kind of going back to when we talked about the public voice, understanding what the public expects of us, yet having to manage a massive workforce and have performance indicators. I'm just kind of keen to make sure that we have a plan moving forward, that we are supporting our forces so that they can then go and do their job and have a really good public kind of perception, because that is really important when we're trying to deliver services.
Sorry, Councillor, what you're referring to in Manchester? It could be
the incident at the airport.
Oh, the airport incident. Fine, thank you.
I apologise, it's not really about that. I think for me, when I looked at everything that was coming across the social media, I kind of pinpointed the fact that is our force adequately supported and do we have everything in place? And I think once when I read this report and it said requires improvement, I thought it's something that we need to have a plan in place for.
Alison?
Yeah, so this is an area that obviously we've asked the Chief Constable lots of questions. We had a meeting about 4 weeks ago where we looked at the report in lots of detail. It was a very, very long meeting where we went through all the recommendations, and this is one of the areas that we really, had a very deep dive into. And this refers to a couple of things. One is workload. So because we've got outstanding CDI, our officers have very high workloads, and it is what it is. There is no way around that. If you record every crime, as we do here in West Yorkshire, then the officers that you've got have got to be allocated those crimes and have got to deal with them. So that was a concern for the inspector, although it's important to say that in the areas that the public are most interested in, safeguarding and neighbourhood policing, we've actually got lower workloads than we did in 2021 when we were assessed as outstanding by HMIC. Just need to reflect on that. So there are other areas where workloads are higher, but there's a balance to be struck between what the public want and expect and what the CDI reality means for workload across the board. So lots more staff in safeguarding, lots more frontline police officers in terms of neighbourhood policing teams, which is what the public had told us they wanted. The other area of concern from HMIC was mental health of police officers. And this has been, I'm a former chief executive of a mental health organisation, this is a passion of mine. We have been regularly in communication with West Yorkshire Police about all the different resources and support that they've got in place. And I have to say, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And I think that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is there's lots and lots and lots of stuff. So trim's at the heart of it, but there are so many different areas of support that have been brought in by West Yorkshire Police. And so the conversations we've been having, that I'll also be having with Oscar in a meeting, again, is about how do we create pathways to support middle managers, those decision makers who are supporting frontline staff. So rather than just say, here's a list of all the things we've got, because it's a very, very, very long list, you look at a community outcomes meeting that we held where Damien Miller gave us a long list of all the things. I think he spoke for 20 minutes talking about all the different areas of mental health support, no wonder people are confused. So we need to come up with some pathways about if you've got depression, these are the options. If you've got, you're struggling with sleep, these are the options, because don't forget, police officers are experiencing trauma on a very, very regular basis, and this is where the mental health issues arise. So we're very alive to this, West Yorkshire Police are very alive to this. We're already talking about how they can improve what they've already got, streamline it, make it easier for officers to be able to access what's there by giving the information to key people in the organisations, rather than everybody have to know everything, which is currently what's been happening. So kudos to West Yorkshire Police for bringing in so much stuff. It's too much stuff. Let's clarify for officers what it is, give managers and HR the tools they need to be able to offer those pathways, because trauma in policing is massive, not just in West Yorkshire Police, but it's right that it's being picked up.
And can I say thank you for the response, Alison, because this wasn't supposed to be question. It was just that certain parts in the report, there's more to be done. So you assured us that you're doing all you can do, John and Tracy, to support the police. We are just concerned, really. So that's brilliant to know that all this work is happening.
Sorry, just to follow up, Chair, from my experience as Chair of the Hospital Trust that went through COVID, the difficulty with mental health assessment of effectiveness of what you're offering is by the very nature of the confidentiality of it. You don't know how many people have taken it up.
Exactly.
And also, you know, we had the same problem where you have an awful lot of avenues available for people, but very often the people in those circumstances find it difficult to make the decision to go down one of those avenues. And then, as I said, you don't know how to measure it, how effective they've been. So
we've had this exact same conversation.
I'm not quite sure how you measure that, but it's a problem. It'd be useful if there was something out there that enabled it.
I gave lots of suggestions, and obviously I'm not operationally involved, but I gave lots of suggestions because this is an area of expertise for me, and I think that there's some simple ways that we can, but obviously I'll be talking to Oz in more detail about some of these ideas that I've got for improving, just having health and well-being on every one-to-one agenda. It's so simple. And I think if we did that, those conversations would just be so much more regular, fluid, non-invasive. People won't think that I'm not behaving, I'm not performing. It's just about making it just a normal conversation, and everybody has those conversations all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another of the areas in the report that came out as requiring improvement was the investigating crime, and I wondered whether this is due in part to the attrition rates for detectives. Are people going into that role not understanding what it's about and not understanding the expectations of them in that role, and what else contributes to this?
I wonder if the Chief could respond to this, because I know it was an area of real focus from West Yorkshire Police, because it's something the public wanted to see. They want to see justice, don't they? And we did have a problem with recruitment in detectives. That was a real challenge. But I wonder if the Chief could pick this up, because I think it's a really important point.
It's not so much to do with that, actually. In the simple term, we have had a crisis in detective training, retention, recruitment, attraction, development, and part of that's to do with the service profile of the force and the workforce, and that's a national issue. So that's one element. The areas for improvement around the HMIC it's the volume crime. It is the crime, sadly, that probably affects most members of the community of West Yorkshire. So we do the high harm stuff really well, and they've got no real issue with that. We do the complex stuff really well. It's the volume of investigations which comes through the front door that, quite frankly, policing up and down the country almost hasn't got the capacity to deal with, and that's what we're struggling around. There are some things we've tried to do over the last couple of years, and it is in a far better place than last time. So I think 2 inspections ago we were required improvements for investigations, then we got it to a good, and then it's come back down really not so much around our structures, processes, people, but about outcome rates and detection rates. Nobody in the country has got above adequate in that, which tells me something about the current climate of the inspectorate. So the area which we're strategically looking at over the next few years is developing that ability to deal and with investigate with large amounts of crime. It is the theft here, certain types of non-domestic burglary and other elements of assault that are not domestic related, harassment, public order, and things that we would all like to see investigated and detected, but there's just a real challenge in terms of resources. So what comes through a lot of this report is, I agree with you, but actually some of it is down to not process and policy or people and training, it's about the volume of people in these things. So we've got what we call district investigation teams, which are the people who deal with the stuff that's not traditional CID, counter-terrorism, domestic abuse, safeguarding, sexual offences, and that's where a lot of that volume sits. But they are, as Deputy Mayor says, a third of UK policing has got less than 5 years in. I'll say it again, a third of the whole of the United Kingdom's policing has got less than 5 years service. So some of them have only got 1 year service. And these are the people, 80% of the front line's got less than 5 years service. These are the people who are investigating these crimes. So it's a real challenge for us because it's a problem that moves through the organisation, and we'll say, right, we'll take it off neighbourhood policing because they need to be problem solvers, and put it onto patrol. You put it onto patrol and they say, well, I can't respond to the incidents, they can't get back to victims. So you put it into an investigations team who should have the time to do it, but there's not enough of them because we need people on neighbourhood policing and patrol and CID and safeguarding, and it kind of moves around. So one of the big challenges the HMIC comes later is that you haven't got the structures and process to have the right people in the right place at the right time. And that's because there isn't enough of us.
Yeah.
But I won't keep using that excuse, we're doing the best we can do, but quite frankly, the area that often suffers the most is that volume of investigations, because we've got to focus on safeguarding the most vulnerable and the most serious crime, and that's the bit that creates us most challenge. So we're trying our best going forward with it, but I know it's going to be a challenge because it's not a quick solution. Sorry, long answer.
No,
there is a challenge on detective. It's that area of the investigation isn't because the investigators and detectives aren't accredited good enough at the jobs. It's about you've got very young, inexperienced and staff with very high workloads trying to investigate a lot of stuff, and they're not always getting through it properly.
And because of that ghost that Tracy talked about, the supervisory posts are occupied by people who also have not got masses of years of experience. So that is the added problem. But I will point you to the report that says 82 out of 100 of investigations are effective. 82 out of 100. Now, if I was sitting in an exam and got 82% out of 82%, I'd be quite happy with that. I'm not saying that we should be happy with that. What I'm saying is there's a lot worse position we could be in, but we still need to build.
And I think as well, just our role, certainly as the Mayor, the interventions that I can make with the money that I have and the powers at my disposal to stop crime happening, to try and lessen this workload, is something I hope that we can see in the data, that actually there are areas of criminality that are falling. So we also must celebrate the positive. So whilst there might be challenge from Peel about the outcomes, I think we should also celebrate the decrease in some crimes, particularly, obviously, what's really focusing a lot of people's minds at the moment, quite rightly, is knife crime. To see those numbers going in the right direction, we also need to see both sides of the story, I think.
Well, thank you for your detail. I just have one more comment, Chair, if I may. I'd just like to thank the Mayor for letting us know that the 18 areas of improvement are being looked at, and there is a focus on those. That's really good to hear, because as Councillor Smith said earlier, it was an area that was concerning the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, please. Councillor Carter.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to go back to this, I think very pertinent point made by Councillor Maston, that a member of the public team requires improvement investigating crime, and say, good God, investigating crime, isn't that what it's all about? And Chief Constable's answer was very full, and I agree with most of it. But I have to say, isn't there an element here of losing, despite what the Mayor said, of losing senior officers because they can't do right for doing wrong? And the confidence of officers in actually being backed up if things go not quite as you planned is at a fairly low ebb, and that contributes big style to senior police officers, I think, perhaps quitting sooner than they ought. And the second, the answer to that, the second part of the question is, what about our training? I accept that you have got a lot of junior officers, absolutely, and they require time, proper care, proper training. Are you happy that our training and our selection of new officers is up to scratch?
If I could just open before the Chief will obviously comment on that, but also to say, as members of this panel, I think it's also important for all of us to tell the full story about policing, because it could so easily be a great headline, couldn't it? Police out of control, they can't solve crimes. I think the public also need to start to regain trust in policing, because all of us, if something bad happened to our family or us, who do we ring? We ring the police. And we have to build that trust. But of course, policing is by consent. So it's a team effort. The police have to also stand up to scrutiny. But I think it doesn't serve any of us well if we fall into those screaming headlines as you speak about, without the nuance of actually the pressure policing have been under for the last 14 years, and the handbrake turns in policy, in programmes that have come from quite a chaotic leadership. So it's also about the bigger picture, I would suggest. But the Chief,
Sorry,
I want to
can I just
comment.
come back on that? And these are political excuses. That's not really acceptable. We know there's been difficulties, but there'll always be difficulties. There will always be difficulties.
I'm not saying
there have been throughout my time in public life. There have always been difficulties, and you won't get away from that. So to say 14 years of chaos is, you're introducing. What I want is to hear from the Chief Constable how we are addressing these issues, because the bold headline here is not my bold headline, it's in this report, and I don't think it's helpful, but I agree with you there, I don't think it's at all helpful to just say investigating crime when 82% have been...
Councillor Carter,
yeah.
and I say it's need to be through the chair, the mayor, not to...
We could pass the Chief Constable to.
But the mayor could pass it on to the Chief Constable. Thank you. But she was just giving an assumption how she felt to pass it on.
And 88 out of 100, not 82, but maybe the Chief would like to comment.
Yeah, so officers at all levels and in all parts of public service, you see that in councils and the NHS are taking the opportunity to leave the organisation as soon as they possibly can, and that's an indicator of pressure, stress, the effects on their family life. I wish we could retain more operational frontline detectives for longer, middle leaders and senior leaders for longer, but it's just a symptom of the pressure upon public services. I'll probably make no more comment on the accountability and other things. We've got to be held to account, and it's only right to do so, but it's increasingly difficult and personal to individuals rather than their roles. The investigations on face value, as you say, it's an area which we were hoping not to be in. Some of it has come down to a national drive to improve. I suppose I keep coming back to it's not absolutely not political or anything. It's a better position we're in now than we were 3-4 years ago in investigations. We're getting more people to court, more detections, more crimes are getting investigated. There's an irony of some of the criticisms that officers' workloads are high. Yeah, they are, because we're investigating crime. But it comes back to that challenge of not having enough people in the right place to do those jobs. But I give you my absolute commitment. I share that belief with you. It's the core principle of what we're doing in policing, which is to safeguard and help and protect people, life and property, and then to investigate crime. But it keeps coming down to us too much. The training element, it's a fair point. I wish we had more time to train. Do you want me to train the staff or send them to jobs? Because at the moment there's 500 people in this county who we're still waiting to see from calls yesterday. But if you want me to put a load of people in a classroom and train them, and it'll be 700, So that's the dilemma. That's a national issue we need to address as a country. We have the same amount of staff as the whole of the United Kingdom's military do. They get twice as much money as we do, but they've got to buy ships and planes. Well, there aren't many of them around. So they spend all their time training and equipping themselves to go to war. Thankfully, they very rarely do. We spend all of our time at war on crime and no time to train. It's the account of flip. There's got to be somewhere in between. So if the country's going to commit to spend 2.5% on GDP, we need to spend more than 0.9% on policing if this country wants us to investigate crime. I come back to it, but my responsibility is West Yorkshire. I give you an absolute resolute commitment. We've had a series of programmes to improve our investigation capacity and capability. I will keep driving those forwards. And as I said earlier, we're definitely looking now strategically that it feels like we've sorted out better call handling, call attendance, safeguarding, non-recent sexual offences, response policing, and we're making some real inroads into safety on the roads. The bit we need to improve is that volume investigation, but I'll tell you now that's the hardest, because that's the kind of bit that keeps moving around. Sorry for another long answer, I apologise.
And can I just interject and say that I hope that Tracy and I, when we come to these meetings, have always demonstrated our absolute utmost respect for West Yorkshire Police and the officers who are there on the front line every day. We have got a job to do, but actually we see the hard work, we see the dedication. I meet many, many people on the front line, and I have got nothing but admiration for the work that they're doing. But I have to do a job as well, so that the people of West Yorkshire have assurance that the right people are doing that job.
If I may just add as well, that this is part of the jigsaw, that West Yorkshire Police is one part of criminal justice. And a lot of officers who have worked diligently in order to try and get an outcome that is justice for the public, and then they find themselves in a criminal justice system that is actually counter to expectations of swift justice. So it's only one part of the expected outcomes for justice for the public and for the people of West Yorkshire. But just to absolutely stand by what Alison has just said, it is an extraordinary act of bravery to be a police officer, and they serve us incredibly well, but we will always hold them to account when they're falling short.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I think what this question and the subsequent responses highlights for me is, one, we can't do anything in isolation.
Yeah.
The forces, like all other areas of public life, is trying to balance resources with competing pressures. And it also highlights some of the direct tensions between some of the competing targets and pressures we've got. For example, investigating crime compared to the way we react to managing offenders and suspects. So I know in the report on page 46 it says that officers in public protection have been diverted to support CID, which, given the pressures on solving crime, you could understand, but then there's a competing pressure and something else. It's like squeezing a balloon, isn't it? And it's just being reassured that we are all fully aware of this and we are managing those competing pressures and targeting the resources as best we can.
I think what is reassuring is that in the Peel report, leadership is highlighted as good. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Good, or it's pointed at as something that we should be celebrating. That at least but we do have that good leadership. So those decisions that you're raising, questioning who goes where, the operational ebb and flow. I'm reassured that not just by the Peel report, but also my experience, that we do have, and we are lucky to have, very good leadership here in West Yorkshire that are dealing with incredibly challenging priorities to keep the people and the public safe. But in the report, it does mention leadership as an area of strength.
Thank you.
Chair, I think the Mayor's report and tries to give you some reassurance compared to those other large, complex, multifaceted organisations. we're very fortunate to be at the right end of that kind of place, and that's why there's a list there of the forces, because whilst colleagues might disagree with up and down the country, it is different in Manchester, West Yorkshire, London, Birmingham. It is a different type of policing to some other areas. And so that's where, when we compare against those, I suppose what I'm trying to say, it's not all perfect, there's more to be done. I think we probably are getting a balance more right than others, and I'm sorry for saying that. And that's what the HMIC is kind of indicating through this assessment in that sense. So whilst it's never as good as I want it to be, I'd much prefer to be here than somewhere else. I'll put it that way.
Okay, thank you. I have no more speaker in this report, but because there is a brilliant report, we have good sections and we have sections that need to look at. The good section, don't celebrate and take your eyes off it, maintain it. At the same time, when you're working towards to get it where today. So thank you for what you're doing so far. But keep an eye and the one that need improvement. Thanks. We'll move on to item 6, performing. Tracy.
Thank you. And for new members, this is the regular performance monitoring report for the first quarter 24-25. I'll just pick out a few highlights if I may, Chair. We've continued to include information on 101 calls and shows a low average answer time. Last June saw a big increase in answer time, so the low average time now is particularly pleasing. We've also continued with the national comparisons for rape and sexual offences. That gives us an understanding of the current picture. Domestic abuse crimes are shown per 1,000 population, with all areas seeing a decrease. But if I may say that there was a report out last week or the week before on women of the North. And here in the North, unfortunately, relative to other areas in the country or the national average, women of the North are more likely to be subject to domestic violence. They're also more likely to die earlier, be unpaid carers, not be in work, etc. So as women and leaders, we have a job of work to do. And the domestic violence will always be a priority to try and bring those numbers down, if only to the national average, because it doesn't seem right that just because of where you live, you're potentially more vulnerable to domestic crime and violence. 2.2 talks about the updates on cybercrime, the event organised by the Regional Organised Crime Team at Leeds Uni. Hate crimes are shown at 2.33. And even with the events of last October, the rolling 12-month figures are below that seen at the same time last year, and good to see the number of repeat victims also falling. One thing I'm particularly proud of, and the panel will know that stalking has been a priority for me, and as stalking is on the timeline to femicide, if we can reduce those women vulnerable, and it's mainly women vulnerable to stalking, potentially we can save lives. So I'm really pleased to see the increase in the number of stalking protection orders. At the start of my first term in office, there was only one order in place. I know it is a huge piece of work for officers to undertake, and the detail you need to supply in order to get one of these orders through is a lot of admin, but now there are 14 more in process, and it's such a vital tool to protect victims in the campaign to stop this terrible offence. There's also, I think, 25, Wendy, isn't it, going through the process as well. I'm pleased to see homicides starting to reduce, as I mentioned earlier, and national comparisons show the drop in knife crime, where others are seeing increases. And the figures on killed and seriously injured shows the current position for the rolling 12 months. I'll be talking about Vision Zero later in my report, Chair. But I think it's so expensive for our health system as well in the round to have people who are seriously injured. And in West Yorkshire, my understanding is it costs us £500 million to respond to the investigations, the NHS, the support for families, all of that goes into victims who have been harmed by road traffic instances. So we can actually help the economy not only save lives and stop families going through hell, but we can also help the economy if we can reduce the number of deaths and seriously injured on our roads. We've seen over the life of the last plan how the figures have changed due to heightened focus, such as I say, stalking prevention orders, and others that have changed due to national events. And understanding the differences, as we discussed earlier, means we keep a tight focus on the priorities of the police and crime plan and what's required for the next one. And if I can also say at this point that we are going out to consultation on the next police and crime plan, so I'm hoping we can have a discussion about that going forward. So happy to take any thoughts on the performance monitoring. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for this report, Tracy and Hansen. I'll move on to Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. 1.1.2, performance levels. It says Bradford continues to decline. Is there any additional context we can provide around that would be?
Wendy? I think it's victim satisfaction.
Oh, yeah, victim satisfaction.
Sorry.
So, yeah. So under this, we saw different areas. It's the keeping people informed of progress, which is what we're seeing as increasing victim satisfaction. So Bradford had seen a big increase in that, but as the Chief has said, competing demands for police officers means they do struggle with this keeping people informed of progress. So we were seeing a decline in Bradford, but that is being picked up now because they do know the tools they need to do to be able to deal with it, but are looking at that currently. But that decline is after a big rise because Bradford were well below everybody else and are now caught up. But we're seeing a slight decline, but that is being addressed looking at this.
And we should also say that BME satisfaction is always lower than white satisfaction, and clearly Bradford, their demographics are unique in West Yorkshire, so I think it's 40% of Bradford's population is from a BME background.
I take that point, but it doesn't explain the decline, does it? Because it's the same population that we're looking at.
Yeah, but it's after a big increase. It's declined, but now we're putting work in that they've done in Calderdale and Wakefield. So Calderdale and Wakefield have gone up because of the telephone calls and the interventions that they've put in place. So that's now being picked up in Bradford, which is a bigger district than Wakefield and Calderdale, so it's harder to do.
What Alison's trying to say, the BME satisfaction is really based on this keeping informed in progress, much more than white satisfaction is. So any slight decline will be seen there before anywhere else. So it's that balancing of priorities.
Thank you.
The interpretation there.
Can I ask just a follow-up question? Thank you. So I think, is there a link between that sort of statistic and what was highlighted in the Peel report about different systems in different areas of force? Are we alive to that, and are we picking up best practice and rolling it out across West Yorkshire?
Chief?
Yeah, there's some comments in the HMRC peer report about victims code of practice and updating the victims. That's more of a statutory thing. There's some areas to improve in that. But yeah, it is one of those areas that every time we do a pilot in Calderdale, and then that rolls out to Wakefield, and then the inspectorate come in and then say, well, you're doing it different in two areas compared to all files. So yeah, we're piloting and moving it around. But there are some other areas where just culture of circumstances and people trying to improve all the time end up doing things differently. So it is an area that we try our hardest to sort of mitigate. There's a whole performance improvement, best practice sharing forum, the local policing, governance and structures are all about that and learning. We're trying to put things on the College of Policing and the local database as well. But so we do through the local accountability processes, test things, challenge them, see if they work, and then spread them out. And we do our very best to constantly try to be corporate in the way in which we go. But again, that comes back to being sometimes a big organisation with large structures. I remind you that Leeds alone is bigger than 14 police forces. So it's kind of trying to get them all doing the same thing at the same time. So yes, and yes, I think.
Thank you. I do understand the point that we're not a homogenous region, you know, and we might need to employ different systems and tactics in different local communities. It's just whether, you know, there was a correlation, whether we're aware of that and whether we're working towards, where it's sensible to sort of normalise some of these processes and take best practice.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Shah.
In the report, point 2.4, I'm pleased to see there's been discussion around neighbourhood watch. We've recently, in my ward, set up a new neighbourhood watch, and the MPT team have been absolutely fantastic in helping set that up. And the sergeant said that the intel that they're getting in relation to localised crime and ASB is really valued from neighbourhood watches. Also, the report tells us that there's a decline ongoing on calls for service. Do you envisage that will continue?
Just to say about Neighbourhood Watch, my understanding is we are the West Yorkshire Police, we're the only region that funds, is this correct, John? That funds or supports Neighbourhood Watch. Because actually, doesn't it make a lot of sense? The community, eyes and ears, incredibly helpful. It's not just curtain twitchers, they get a bad rep, actually, in Neighbourhood Watch, because I think often they're community-minded, and haven't we seen an example of what good Neighbourhood Watch is during Hare Hills, and we're going to hear about that later, that people who know their community are protecting their community from harm and from crime. So they get a bad rep, and I'm really pleased that Neighbourhood Watch are supported here in West Yorkshire, and that early intel is really important. But to the second point you raised, just
calls for service, there's a decline again. Do you envisage that will continue?
I'm not quite sure what that refers to, Alison.
Sorry, Wendy was just showing me Stelline, so I didn't hear
It's 2.4 calls for service. There's been a recent decline.
Yeah, don't just say it.
Yeah, so what we had seen was really high contact. So, and we've reported that to panel in the past. So if you look at in the main report at 1.2.1, you can see the graph there, and there is a decline, but it's just taking us back to normal levels. So we're expecting now, I mean the chief will probably tell me off for saying this, but I'm expecting that will now continue. I suppose it's they look at the different ways that they're coming in. So what we're seeing is 999 calls are still quite high, and that's what the chief was referring to with the number of people expecting a call. But what we're seeing is on the 101, really quick answer times, which is really good, and we've looked at the stability of the workforce in the call centres that really helps this. And what happens is when you've got stability in the workforce and they're able to answer calls, we don't get as many repeat calls. So some of this will be repeats, which brought the high workload because of them not being able to answer. So being able to get on top of it also means it will bring down those numbers of repeat calls, which is really good.
And just to pick up on Neighbourhood Watch, because I'm really passionate about it, you should look at the work of Terry Green, Sergeant Terry Green in Shipley, so Bradford Sergeant. Amazing. She's built up a huge number of members of her local Neighbourhood Watch, over 5,000. Yeah, it's like won loads of awards. And during COVID, they were using it as a hub to keep people safe. They were making referrals to Mind. They were doing food bank shops for people, and all sorts of stuff looking after vulnerable people. So it's innovative. It just shows what the police can do when they're given the right support and resources. And Tracy agreed alongside the Chief Constable last year that we would use £10,000 of the Police Property Act fund money to support Neighbourhood Watch, because they do need money to bring in more volunteers, you know, so that we can give them a few freebies to give out to their communities. So Tracy and Chief Constable funded that last year, and I'm sure we'll get asked for some more going forward, but we're really supportive of Neighbourhood Watch because it's an asset.
I always like and enjoy the reminders that I also contributed to it. So thank you for that, Alison. I did think it was just police funding, but thank you for reminding me that I also contributed.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. I've got two questions, if I may. The first one's on section 3.7, about the proportion of workforce from ethnic minorities. Just perhaps help clarify my understanding on this. At 3.7.2, there's a reference to a much higher proportion in the recent recruitment rounds, which I think we took this paper back in April, and I think we had some queries on it, but this is the paper that's been sent last night, which we've not had a chance to see yet. But given that, if you look at the table above, it says December 23 to June 24. But a bit further up under 3 in that chart, it quotes as June 23. Yep, up in the little chart at the top of the page here under section 3. So in the figure in that section 3, safer places, thriving communities, we have 12 months, June 23, 8.7%. So we're 8.7% at June 23, and it's 8.7% at June 24.
Yeah, so it's
I don't understand
yeah.
why the increase from the recruitment would not be reflected in the actual figures.
I think it's an error.
June 24.
Yeah. So what we're looking at is the total. So that is the total of the workforce. The recruitment, if you look at the table at 3.7, actually at June 24, officer recruitment was at 9.8%. So that's showing that increase under the recruitment.
Under the uplift.
Under the uplift.
But recruitment, and yet the total percentage is the same. It must have been that there must have been a lot of levers, therefore.
No, I think it's an error.
Yeah,
I think it will be.
Yeah.
Trevor, can you come and work for me, please?
Well, in a way.
So I'm sorry to pick it up, but it's something we have raised before, and I'm just trying to get my head around.
Yeah.
I was expecting to see a bigger number there, and I'm just trying to get my head around.
Let me give you a copy of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, okay, well, it's something we can pick up.
That's what I've sent to Sam, so
we'll have a look. We can pick it up again next time.
Okay, we'll have a look.
Yeah, have a look and we can pick it up again. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
No, it's fine. And my second query was around cybercrime. I'm just trying to get my head around these statistics. Sorry, it's Appendix 2, after 4.56, Appendix 2. Can you just explain to me the reference of the reports? Which area are we talking about? Regionally?
So what we're talking about is West Yorkshire here. So these are the reports. So cybercrime and fraud go to action fraud, and then some of the cases will come back to West Yorkshire to deal with. So what we're looking at here is the reporting from action fraud on the number of cybercrimes and fraud. So the numbers are just for West Yorkshire. Yeah.
But we should just remind people that policing's top slice nationally for fraud, so that money goes to fund action fraud, and they then all the crimes go to them, and then they decide. We've had a paper on this is why I know, because lots of people in the communities we serve are very unhappy about how fraud is investigated or not, and that's because of this really strange anomaly that the money is top sliced. So action fraud decide what comes back to West Yorkshire, what gets investigated locally, what they'll investigate and what can't be investigated. West Yorkshire do investigate some frauds independently of action fraud under quite specific circumstances, but most frauds go to action fraud, and I have to say most are not investigated.
The public are very, from my understanding and what people tell me, they are very disappointed with action fraud. It just feels like it goes into a big pit, and you don't get justice and you don't get treated as an individual.
So there's a very high threshold of losses before they're looked. And even where we here in West Yorkshire have got cases where there are multiple frauds totaling hundreds of thousands of pounds, because each individual loss is below 20,000 or whatever their threshold is, they won't investigate. It's we've been picking it up through caseworkers. It's a national scandal. Nothing we can do about it.
I think that's my concern, picking up from people I know in the business community, the concern around that. If you see in that chart further down, the disparity and huge amount from limited companies, which is these are smaller limited SME enterprises that really can't afford to lose this amount.
It can close a business, can't it?
Yeah.
But West Yorkshire Police's hands are tied. We had a really thorough paper on this late last year, I think it was, and for exactly that reason.
I mean, that is going to lead to a level of dissatisfaction in the business community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pay their rates and contribute through, you know, through central government to the,
Yeah.
to
But
the
not just the
funding.
business community, individuals.
Individuals as well.
I
It's
did a
a
bit of
huge amount of
casework
money,
with
isn't
someone
it?
selling a caravan and didn't get her money, and she's one of many people, and exactly the same situation.
But also back to trust, and it erodes the trust from the public in getting justice. And it's not in our gift, so it is quite a frustration.
Okay. Can I go back to Trevor's first question with clarification? This is why I pushed for the report to come to us early that we could read it. Even if it doesn't go out to members, could you get it to myself and Samantha that we could read and correct, well not correct, but point certain things out to you? Because this report has gone out to the public, and it's not everyone's going to watch this to see clarification, and they'll be thinking exactly what we were thinking. So it's sometimes you know when you go, this was doing that.
The June 24 figure's right.
Yeah.
So that's what the public need to know. It's
Well,
right.
is
So
that
when
how
they see-
everyone is watching this? They'll read this and thinking,
But that paper's gone out, so it doesn't go out. Yeah.
I think you put it in just for me to find it, didn't you?
Yeah. Lots of tricks.
I know John used to do this.
okay, I don't have any more speakers, but is everyone happy or is any councils?
Apologies. I've got a couple more points I'd like to pick up on. The first one is domestic abuse crime reference 1.3.6, and there seems to be a dramatic fall there, and I'm just wondering if there are any caveats around that figure.
Yes, it's something that we have discussed actually. Wendy, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think we've discussed this, haven't we? When we're talking about the number of domestic abuse crimes, it's that criming of the top level and the ones underneath. I suppose looking at this, talking about that triangulation, what we've been looking at is, although the number of domestic abuse crimes has fallen, it's really hard to tell whether it's because domestic abuse is going down or whether that... So what we're looking at is the repeat victims, because that gives us an idea of that, and the numbers of repeat victims haven't reduced, because what we're saying is, if these crimes are falling because of the way it's being reported, there should still be those same number of victims, because it'll be the same number of victims with that top level crime. So what we have seen here is that there is a slight decrease in repeat victims, which is something that, which indicates to us that is actually going down slightly. So we're not seeing a reduce in the number of crimes, but actually domestic abuse is going up because there's more repeats. It's the opposite. We're seeing that decline. So
and that's very welcome.
Yeah.
Any fall in the number of victims, which is what ultimately what we're trying to do, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, but that has to be caveated with what the Mayor was saying, in that when you look at national figures, there's a national look at domestic abuse that comes out once a year in November. So we'll be looking at it again this November to see that comparison, and I'll bring that to panel then. But at the moment, we still have the most domestic abuse crimes per 1,000 population. And although, as you can see, it's reducing across all areas, I'm expecting that will be the same across the country, and we'll see that sort of, so we're still high. So just to bear that in mind as well.
And one of the things I want to really focus on is how can we reduce the repeat perpetrators? How do we get in early when something is flagged and there's a criminal, there's violence, to stop people doing it again and again? And that, obviously, that pattern then can lead to femicide. So we're funding the CARA programme. We actually, to the Mayor's Community Safety Fund, Rosalie Riley got some money as well, working with families and with perpetrators who want to change their behaviour to protect their family and need the tools to do so. We've got to intervene here. We can't just sit on our hands.
Thank you. Just one more, if I may. So this is on page 11, and it's the average days from police referring a case to CPS, and the CPS authorising charges increased in above the national average. Could you give me, again, some additional context around that?
Wendy?
Yeah, we're working under the Criminal Justice Board. This is part of the measures that they look at to show what's happening with CPS, that sort of thing. We were, I wanted to put this in because we had highlighted that it was well below. What's happening here is there's been an increase, as the Chief has talked about, getting those people through by doing those outcomes. It's going into the court system, which is already backlogged. So we're seeing this go up and down, I have to say. So although it's up at the moment, the previous quarter it was down. So I think looking forward, we need to look at how we can properly represent this so the panel can be assured that we're doing everything that we can under that.
Thank you, Wendy. And I understand that not all of this is within the control of the force. You know, we're looking at the system, and we've talked about that before. But as we've said before as well, you know, justice delayed is justice denied. And are we assured that the elements which are under our control we're doing as well as we can with?
Yeah, so can I just say that I chair the Local Criminal Justice Board. I had a pre-meet for the meeting that we're having next week, and actually this is massively reduced in the latest data. I was trying to find so it's massively gone down in the latest data, so yeah, so obviously it must just have been a blip.
Something,
Sorry, so if John can also comment.
No, we can bring figures back if we need to, but we're, you know, relatively well nationally recognised for having our policing criminal justice processes as good as they can be. I wholeheartedly support you and what the panel say about swift justice. I'll say it again, and I think I've said this before, I just need to remind the panel and the public we're in a position now that when the police arrest somebody and bring them into custody, unless they wish to remand them into prison, which is only a very small amount, they cannot charge them. They have to release them. The law says you can't charge them. So they've got to be released, and we've got to put a file in if we wish to prosecute them. You know, we're working hard nationally to try and change that. I think the objective here is to be able to get charging advice whilst people are in custody, because that delay and that attrition affects victims, it affects the system, it affects offenders. And so it's not the local CPS's issue or their fault. There's some definite challenges, and we've got ourselves in a country where the police can arrest somebody but we can't do anything with them and they're going straight out the door. You know, we might bail them and we might give them conditions, and the irony of all of that is the only way we can get a charge and get the system working is if we try and remand them into custody. Guess what? The prisons are available. So there's some stuff that's happened in the country for the right reasons at the right time, I'm sure, which is going against investigations, outcomes, and actually getting people to what used to be in this building, you know, into courts.
John, would it be worth talking about the charging pilot?
Yeah, so as a result of that, we try and do our own thing in West Yorkshire, try and push the boundaries where we possibly can. So we've got to a place, when they're in custody, the CPS, through a telephone system, are under significant pressure to answer the phone, deal with the cases. So we've got to a place where if we feel as though that's not happening quick enough, we will, under some emergency legislation, charge them and get them to court. What that's happening, and we haven't lost any of those charges yet in that process, what that's showing and opening the eyes to the rest of the criminal justice system is those people are more often than not pleading guilty because they can see what's coming. It's an early appearance, an early challenge to their behaviour, and that's helping victims, it's helping the criminal justice system, it's helping everything else. And it's also, I think, having the positive effect that I don't think it works like this, but when the CPS directs West Yorkshire on the phone, they're answering the phone quicker as well. I'm sure it doesn't kind of work like that. But it's no coincidence that they're also giving us quicker advice nationally. So we're trying to do legally, you know, within the bounds of the law, what we can. And I know that some people in CPS would love to be able to get to the position of that early charge, because early charge, early court appearance, and then we're off. And I think it's the best thing for victims and witnesses, and it's the best thing to get perpetrators, you know, to stop their offending.
And just to say that that charging pilot is being really well regarded by the Home Secretary. So we are in a region where I think we're ready to and willing to innovate in order to get better outcomes for the public. So it's really great work, and yeah, they're definitely rolling it out across the UK, which is great. We're the first adopters. It's always a good place to be.
Okay, thank you. So should we just move on now, yes? Everyone's happy? Okay, item 7.
Thank you, Chair. So this is regarding legislation and protocols relating to policing and crime. So this paper is to give an understanding of the current legislation and protocols in policing that affect the next police and crime plan. The Policing Protocol 23 also states PCCs and mayors should take into account national policy when delivering police and crime plans. So this looks at this national policy landscape currently and what's required. The cover paper talks about the new police and crime plan, the current thinking about priorities and cross-cutting themes. You'll also notice the spotlight on serious violence. We've spoken about that at the panel previously, which is my main election pledge to the public of West Yorkshire. And please, please, please do fill in the survey and ask as many of your constituents to do that. We want to get as many voices as possible to be included in my new plan. Our engagement team's working incredibly hard, speaking to as many people as possible and working with partners too. So I hope that this paper gives the panel some understanding of what is a really changing landscape for the new plan, how we need to be flexible to meet all the requirements nationally and locally. So it's an area of change, but we want to be fleet of foot and responsive to that, but also bearing in mind what the public wants. And that's why this consultation on the plan is so important. So that's it for now, Chair. Any comments?
I think everyone was happy. That was just information.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you. Okie doke. So moving on, if I may.
Item 8.
Thank you, Chair. So any current issues? I did mention earlier Vision Zero launch. That was a fantastic launch. Congratulations to everybody. It got loads of media and national coverage. It was August the 13th in gorgeous Cartwright Hall, Lister Park in Bradford. And it was a family-themed interactive road safety event, excuse me, alongside partners within the wider Vision Zero partnership. The Deputy Mayor was there leading the way, and Councillor Ross Shaw from Bradford. So the strategy is the combination of months of planning and consultation to outline our plan to reduce those killed or seriously injured on the road. And the strategy highlights our key objectives under the safe system approach, the 5 pillars: safe road users, safe speeds, safe vehicles, and our post-collision response. We all know that one death on the roads is one too many. And if I may say, Alison, the way that you lead on this with your own lived experience makes it so urgent, and so many people across West Yorkshire can really relate to the experience that you went through with your sister. And I think it makes a powerful argument that we should do more and we should work really hard to deliver. And we have great collaboration with Ian Greenwood, who has also lived experience. He lost his daughter to road traffic accident, and he's a fantastic advocate and campaigner. So thank you to everybody for all that they do on Vision Zero. You have seen, Chair, that there's been a lot of conversations and press around the SDS 40 early prison release. Beginning in October 23, that was instigated to alleviate the prison capacity issues. You'll remember this was under a Conservative government. On determinate end sentences to be released earlier than the 50% point, initially 18 days early, but then number of days prisoners were released, increased over time to the point in May 24 when it was increased to 70 days prior to their earliest release date. And this was ECSL 70. Lead times has been as little as 3 days in some cases. These lead times pose significant challenges in terms of arrangements required and services involved in the management of people. Of course, people being released without housing, without support, without help with drug treatment, healthcare and so on, is not good for outcomes. So that had a negative impact on the early release scheme. So within days of taking office, July the 12th, 24, the new Lord Chancellor Shabana Mahmood introduced legislation to address prison capacity issue. Now this is known as Standard Determinate Sentence 40%, or SD 40. So this means prisoners will serve 40% rather than the current 50% of their sentences before being released. This does not, just to reassure the panel, this does not include high-risk offence types. This action by the government has allowed for an appropriate amount of time, 6 weeks, to prepare prisoners ready for that release, to make sure they do have that appropriate support. And of course this is backed up by the announcement of 1,000 more probation officers to help those who have got massive workloads already. So for the panel, there are 2 tranches of prisoners that will be released at 40%. The first one is prisoners serving less than 5 years will be released at the 40% mark on the 10th of September this year. And the second tranche, prisoners serving 5 years or more, will be released at the 40% mark, 22nd of October 2024. This means that on those dates, prisoners at a point in their sentence that falls between 40 and 50% will be released. Now, for context for West Yorkshire, in the 12 months to July the 31st, 24, 4,620 people were released from prison into the county, around 380 per month, and SDS 40 will result in about 100 extra releases in September. As prisoners reach 40% thereafter, there'll be small increases in volume, reducing to expected levels over time. But I just wanted to reassure the panel that we have sought reassurance from the probation service that there are packages in place for prisoners as they leave prison, and actually this lead time does give the probation service the time to prepare for whether that's employment or health or drug rehabilitation and so on. So I'm hoping that we will see less of a revolving door, that people are released far too often then end up straight back in prison because of homelessness or falling back into criminality. We've got to stop that revolving door, haven't we? That is not helping the prison numbers. Also, if I may say that moving on to the response to recent national unrest, just had a letter from the Secretary of State, and she has indicated a fund of £600,000 to Leeds to help us with our community cohesion work here in West Yorkshire. So that was very pleasing to hear about that. And I've had an operational update from the Chief Constable following Hare Hill's disorder on the 18th of July. And pleased to be able to confirm to panel there have been 35 arrests to date, with further arrests planned and also comprehensive police investigation underway. While the police will be taking part in a detailed debriefing on the disorder in due course, we are planning a further discussion on the issues that are important to the community in our public community outcomes meeting in November. And what I would like to do, Chair, is talk to members of the community to get their thoughts about what questions we should be asking the Chief Constable and the force in respect to Hare Hills, because there were people on the ground that experienced various things that I think it would be valuable to get their questions as well. So we're developing a programme of consultation with members of the public to try and ensure that we cover all bases. The disorder was not linked to the later instances across the country we saw this summer, and there was no further unrest in West Yorkshire. We can never become complacent, of course, but if I may, Chair, I'd like to give the Chief Constable the opportunity to say a little bit more, and then I'll move on to my update. John.
So on the Hare Hills disorder that starts on Thursday, the 18th of July, I genuinely would like to thank the people, the residents, the communities of Hare Hills for their support of policing, to all the statutory sectors, the local authority and other services, criminal justice, emergency services, charity and voluntary sectors, who were all out helping and assisting. And I'd also like to commend the bravery and the courage and negotiation skills of those frontline police officers who faced a series of violent situations that was unannounced, unplanned, not known, and came out of absolutely nowhere. Panel members will be aware from the media the local authority requested the police's assistance when they were encountering difficulties in undertaking and executing a court order that they had to do. The police attended very quickly, they supported their local authority colleagues, and there was a protracted negotiation with the family, which during that time a large crowd gathered outside. As a result, the police supported their colleagues in other agencies and fulfilled the duties of that court order, which resulted in, as soon as the children had come out of the house, the police being attacked. And there was a series over the next 3 to 4 hours of violent disorders at different points and in different parts of Hare Hills. The police on occasions had brutality and were overwhelmed at risk in some ways, but they stood their ground in the majority of occasions. However, through engagement with the local people, with key individual networks of contacts, it became very clear that the single target in that violent disorder was the police and nobody else. Throughout the incident, there was no injuries to the public, no damage to public property, private property, businesses, shops, cars, no looting, no other things. There was damage to public property, the road surface, a bus and police vehicles that you've all seen. They were very quickly recovered, the police vehicles that were damaged, and the engagement with the fires, every time that happened, there was then further violence towards the police. So we'll talk about it further in the community outcome meetings, but we, are pleased that nobody was injured in that incident. And I'm very, very grateful, as I say, to the communities, the residents, the voluntary sector, volunteers who in all sorts of places at all different times helped on the night. And also the response over the next 3 days, because as we all know, these things can be a flashpoint. And the resources and the support that we had to as an interagency co-produced response to that was commendable to everybody involved, which meant that whilst there was protest and a lot of people out on the streets, there was no further violence and no disorder. So as the Mayor said, Hare Hills was a very specific part of one community that had a targeted violent disorder towards policing and nobody else. 5 to 10 days later, 10 days later exactly, but 5 days after we'd still been responded to Hare Hills, there was then a series of national disorders that you're all very aware of from the national media, emanating from July in Southport, and I'll make no comment on the misinformation and speculation online that caused that initially. And again, we then had to stand up in the most significant manner over that first week to support the communities of West Yorkshire and communities elsewhere. That meant that policing in West Yorkshire is put onto 12-hour shifts. That's 12 days, I think it was, of 12-hour shifts back-to-back for those trained officers in public order. And we went through the first weekend and saw some issues in Leeds on Saturday the 4th, and they're still subject to investigation. The important thing to remember for the communities of West Yorkshire is, again, I'm so grateful to the partnership, the community cohesion, the resilience that people have shown throughout that time. Because if you just think to 10, 12 significant seats of disorder over the north of England, and not one of those was in West Yorkshire, in Leeds or Bradford or Halifax or Huddersfield or Wakefield. And we have had our challenges with protest, disorder, and targeting of people, whether that's in hotels or establishments or other places. So I think our early intervention, we were the first in the country to do a prosecution for online incitement to hatred, and we were one of the second for the coming offences. We were proactive in our investigations in what we were doing. We got really good support from the local criminal justice system around that, but we also stood up policing across West Yorkshire in a strong and robust manner, and that enabled us to quickly encounter and deal with anything. And it also meant that we could play our part to support the rest of the country. But it was not an easy period for policing. It was not an easy period for the public of West Yorkshire, because whilst we're doing all of that, we're not delivering the services that we should be doing, investigating the crime and doing the reassurance of the patrols. But I think the public and partner agencies understood that, and I'm grateful to them for their support during that period. But I am pleased to report to be one of the few areas of significant urban populations and urban deprivation not to have had any disorder. But that's not just out to police, that's communities, authorities, and the cohesion that's gone over the last 15, 20 years. And lastly, I'll just remind the panel that in the last significant urban disorder in 2011, there was nothing in West Yorkshire either then, so it's not a surprise to us. We've done it, past The previous disorder will remember back to in 2001 in both Airhills and Bradford and Oldham or Rotherham and other places. Sorry, long and vague, I apologise, but some genuine thanks in there for people.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you, John. And just to support that, the bravery of local councillors and members of that community that through the night without sleep were making sure that the fires were put out and people were sent back to their homes. And the fact that nobody was hurt is a really good outcome for us. Of course, we're never complacent, but it's a sense of pride that nobody was harmed. So thank you. And please do log on to watch the con later in the year, because it's important that everybody is across, all of the detail. And the con is online, so please do check that out. And obviously share the details with your communities. And finally, Chair, if I may, I took part in the Times Crime and Justice Roundtable. It was a virtual roundtable with other mayors who also have police and crime powers and responsibilities for the Times Crime and Justice Commission. Topics covered include changes to the criminal justice system, resources for policing, rehabilitation, support for offenders, collaboration between public bodies, early intervention to support young people, and the future governance arrangements. We can do it, and wouldn't it be an extraordinary moment for our country if we could focus on the safety of women and girls in the same way and get better outcomes for women and girls who've been subject to sexual violence and harm in the same swift manner. And I did make that case that maybe there is other innovations that we can learn from in the previous quick journey to justice for those perpetrators during the civil unrest, and use that for violence against women and girls. Also, just to end on a happy note, a couple of nights ago, the Deputy Mayor and myself and John were at the Mayor's Community Safety Fund, giving out those pots of funding from the proceeds of crime to communities to make our communities safer. And we also announced that our next round, it will be live from the 11th of November, closes December the 12th. That's £1 million this time. £1 million that's going back to our communities. So I would encourage all of the councillors here to really talk to your community groups where they're intervening and making a difference in their community to keep us safe, to please do bid in for that money. I think it's over 3.2 million in total, something along those lines, isn't it? That has come from the process of crime back to our communities. So thank you, Chair. That's my updates for now.
And thank you for your updates. I think you
Yes, thank you. Chair, through the Mayor to the Chief Constable, if possible, reference Harehouse. First of all, thank you very much indeed for the policing effort in Harehouse. Officers were put unnecessarily in harm's way. I'm pleased to hear there's further investigations, because all the questions do remain unanswered. As local councillors know, as residents of Harehouse know, also we should pay tribute, as the Chief Constable has done, to the majority of residents in Harehouse who were horrified by what was going on. Would it be correct to say that in fact there were two separate incidents in many ways? There was the initial incident when children's safety officers visited...
Councillor Carter.
Yeah.
I don't think that's appropriate. I just think we need to focus on...
No, I want to know the second part of the riot, which was police.
There was a riot, but this question about the family, I don't think it's appropriate.
No, I'm not going into that. I'm just making... I'm trying to make the point that we're two separate incidents. And I want to make sure the second one is properly investigated.
Please keep your word very careful.
If I may, Councillor, just to say that obviously in the con, we're going to get down to more of the weeds of what's gone on. But I wonder if John could just address that
Yeah,
question.
there's a number of reviews ongoing. There's one around children's services which they're conducting, and we'll just be part of that and we'll leave that alone as to where we're there, and that's not ours. And then there's an operational review that's been undertaken about the policing response, which will look at the physical policing response and then the engagement with communities. There was probably a series of incidents, as I said, there was immediately outside the house, then further down Hare Hills Lane sometime later, and then further again down Hare Hills Lane. All of them have been swept up into one investigation. 35 arrests so far, 20 more people have been identified to arrest, and we've got at least 100 more people who have been identified as offenders, but we haven't identified them yet. And we will continue that investigation, and it will go on for some time. So the vast majority of the people involved throughout it were from local to Hare Hills. Later in the evening, it was very clear that other people could see what was going on and start to turn up, and we'll sweep them up as well.
Chair, that's what I was trying to establish, that it isn't fair that the blame sits on a particular geographical district and its residents, when I know, and the Chief Constable knows, that the second part was as he has just admitted, incomers, and it was then that a lot of the threatening behaviour towards police happened.
So I don't know that yet. We believe that there will have been other people involved, and that's a reasonable assumption, because we've got to identify people. But we'll come back to the fullness of time and know exactly who was looking.
Thank you. Thank you. If I may just say, as a councillor for Leeds Council, I just want to put on record my thanks to Leeds City Council, who almost, within a matter of moments cleaned up the streets with volunteers and others, so that the following days were actually the evidence of that disruption and disorder had gone. And it was quite a feat of organisation and obviously investment as well in people and resources. So I'd like to thank Leeds City Council. Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to go back to the release scheme. I'm not here to make any points about why that's necessary. We all know why. Did I hear correctly that these are coming in two tranches on two specific dates? Okay, so I mean, I don't pretend to be an expert in this area, but I would imagine if you've got dozens of prisoners being released from prison on the same day, they're all pretty much going to want support almost immediately. Some of them should be leaving with a carrier bag and just suppose it's still up. So it's not just the probation service. What's going to be the impact on local councils, communities, on policing? And are we actually assured that we've got the resources available to make sure that those people have got a path to a successful outcome?
Well, whether the reassurance is 100%, of course, this is a normal process that prisoners will be released and they will need those resources around them. Unfortunately, we have too many people for whom, particularly when it comes to housing, end up being homeless and then come straight back to prison. Is it I think the statistics are 50%?
Yeah,
if not higher.
So under the original early release scheme, when it was first brought in, 3/4 of those released early were being returned to prison in the initial weeks. As things settled down and people got to understand the processes, as the system got to understand the processes, that reduced to 50%, which obviously is still really bad news for those people who were being returned to prison. And it stayed at 50% throughout. So we need to see what SDS 40 is giving us. But the early release scheme wasn't working. But I need to point out, as somebody who's been heavily involved in accommodating ex-offenders for years and years and years in previous roles, the system has not worked for generations. And even before early release and now SDS 40, people will leave prison without the right support and the right resources. That is ever thus. And we as a system and as a society need to do something about that. And I need to say that the contracting for accommodation that happened under probation 4 or 5 years ago hasn't really worked in the way that it was hoped. And I used to be I used to run a probation accommodation contract for 10 years, and that really worked. But there was a lot of investment and a lot of support. So we do need to think about how we're investing in these things, and not just at government level, but also the local government level. So lots to do, lots to do.
And certainly I think the opportunity to get into work, we all know around this table that that's going to be a game changer, and that's why it was important when we funded the boot camp courses for telecoms engineers that they were open to people with a criminal record, because you've got to have that opportunity to turn your life around. So the appointment of Lord Timpson, I think, as Prisons Minister is going to be hopefully a game changer, because all of you will know Timpson's employs in their key cutting business and shoe business, they employ people with a criminal record or people coming straight out of prison. We've got to look at this in a more holistic way and support people into housing, with drug rehabilitation and into work, so that they can start to live the life that they more often than not actually want to live, but haven't had those opportunities and have got themselves in a spiral. So I think Lord Timpson will be a great ally in a lot of the work.
He's coming, we've invited him to Leeds, he's coming in
That's
November.
right, that's right. And we want to show him some of the brilliant things that I've witnessed. Dance Unlimited, which is those people who have been in criminality, being introduced to dance and finding hope and joy and a sense of opportunity by being in a family of people with all sorts of different challenges. And that early intervention stuff and prevention is so important.
I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. It just seems to me, as much as I understand the requirement for the SDS 40, that we are, it fills me with anxiety and dread that we're going to be releasing dozens or maybe hundreds of prisoners.
So there was 100 additional in September.
Right.
100.
Staggered.
No, on the day.
On the day.
But can I just say to you that the amount of work that probation and other partners did to prepare, ironically, I think for everybody released on that day, not just the extra 100, but everybody released on those that day and every day afterwards. I think they've had a better service than they've had for years.
Because of the focus.
Because of the focus. I think there's been an injection of funding. I think there's been a lot of work done to make sure that it went well, because obviously the will driver on it.
And the 1,000 probation officers is really welcome, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the workloads are so great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Jay, just a very quick one on when I first got involved with the police authority as it was in those days, was a few years after the Bradford riots, and at the time there was a lot of focus on building relationships and community cohesion, and I think we've seen that over the years that I followed the incidents in Leeds through a variety of different social media and other sources of information, and I think it's a huge credit to the soft power, should we say, of the force. I know the chief's built up over the years, personally, and the officers have, from building relationships. And I think it's the sort of thing that's not picked up in the Peel report, but that power of when the chips are really down and you have to call on relationships and partners, etc., I think speaks for itself in the fact that, as the chief reported, that West Yorkshire was one, if not the only, major urban conurbation. These situations didn't expand further, so I think it's a real credit to the soft workings of the system that's been achieved, that enabled that outcome.
I think it's the clear, hold, build approach as well in communities, and there's a great example from Bradford. What's that one?
But in Hare Hills, for the last 18 months, West Yorkshire Police have been delivering clear hold bills, so they've been doing lots and lots of work with communities, and actually that was invaluable on the night, because all those partnerships came into being, and as a result of clear hold build, just coincidentally, serious violence has dropped 60% in Hare Hills, and general overall crime has reduced by 40%. So the public in Hare Hills could see the benefit of those relationships. And so on the night, they came out to help the police, because the police had been helping them and they could see it. But the KINs, the local leaders, were able to be part of that system that you talked about. And so there was an agreement with local leaders about the police withdrawing to a couple of streets away to protect the police, but also then protect the local community. So it was all symbiotic, but it stemmed from that growing relationship that the police had developed with the local community, and Clear Hold Build was a vehicle, but actually I think it's a testament to the way that the police understand that policing by consent and wanting to build those relationships with the public and work alongside them.
Do you have that other example that you think of?
Yeah, so BD3 Unite, which I've spoken to you about before, which was the first time we used Clayhole Building in West Yorkshire, and it was part of a pilot that was rolled out nationally, where we had 852 burglaries in BD3, working with the communities. 12 months later, that was 0 burglaries. So because those burglaries were linked to serious organised criminality. So it's a really successful way of working, and we are rolling it out to Ashbow. Have now got Ashbow have now got Clayhole Build, and obviously we're looking at other areas. It's key that we've got the right resources though, because
it's resource intensive.
Yeah, you can clear the criminality from an area. You can hold it for a bit, but to build that community using asset-based community development principles, you need money. So the Mayor talked about the Mayor Safe Communities Fund. For the first time ever, we asked groups to bid to deliver the build element of the Clayhole build, and we had quite a lot of people bidding for that. So we're looking forward now to.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for your report.
Pleasure, as always.
And let's take you back to the police. I've already made a speech on Wednesday of the good work the police are doing, and will continue to. And I don't know if you're seeing it on screen, but it's just to say, police go way and beyond for us. Earlier says we have a lovely summer. We have a lovely summer. We all have a lovely summer, but majority of the police didn't have a lovely summer. But we see where they put themselves in front to save us. And on that note, I won't go through all that, but for West Yorkshire Police job, thank you very much for the work that you're doing, and please pass on my thanks to the police for their daily task and role, because without them, we would not enjoy our summer. And if we go back to aerials, it's the police that allowed some of the residents to have a lovely summer and a peaceful night. So again, my thanks goes out for all police, not just West Yorkshire, across the country, because we have seen what happened with the far right, and I've watched police go in the zone and protect us. So thank you. Thank you. Right, we'll move on now to item 9. This is a public element position. I'm sure they're all free. Reaction law. Are there anything?
Agreed action law. Yeah, there's a couple of moves to make at the Mayor's Office request that for the... Oh, sorry, I'm moving on to the fourth agenda block.
Sorry, Chair, I had one. Just on the 8.3.1, halfway down the white section, about the implementation of the PDR system, established in full agenda for auditor, just to make sure we pick it up at some point as appropriate.
Yeah. Thank you.
Chair?
So,
Thank you. Just on item 5.7.1, YWP completion rates. I take on board the comments of the inspector regarding the systems issues that we've had. I'm just wondering whether we could look to get a date of completion in that, just so we can keep an eye on it.
okay, thank you. Item 11. Oh,
Sorry. Yeah, just at the Mayor's Office request that we move a couple of things around that have been raised, and it's an error from our side. For the November meeting, we will be considering the Mayor's annual report rather than the December meeting, and we will take the draft police and crime plan to the December meeting rather than the final draft, because the consultation date has moved a little bit.
okay, thank you. Item 12, complaint received. Jo, could you please?
Thank you, Chair. As Chair of the Complaints Sub-Panel, just the report outlines the 2 complaints which have been received and their status in terms of moving them forward. And that in the case of the complaint against the Deputy Mayor, there will soon be a sub-panel meeting in order to consider that, and details are provided in that report.
Okay, thank you. And we're down to item 30, which everyone would love, again, other business. No? So thank you very much for attending today. I just wanted to take this up each and every one that contributed, and also thank the other officers that didn't get to contribute. Thank you for all that you are doing. Next day and time of meeting is on the 8th of November. So thank you all very much. Have a lovely weekend.
Is it just worth pointing out that the 8th of November will be a slightly earlier start time because it's the Remembrance Day services. And so the plan is to start at 9:30 for a full meeting so that the mayor, the deputy mayor can get away with this.
Okay. So we will be here at 8. Okay. So really, yeah. So all members will be here at 9. I think we will, is it best if we send another time on the back house at 9:30?
Yeah.
Because we'll be looking at 10 o'clock.
To the 9 o'clock.
We have to be here for, yeah, so it's a little invite.